The first confirmed detail didn't come from a press conference. It came from the front steps of a quiet home in Arizona. According to publicly available information confirmed by People, investigators observed what appeared to be small droplets outside the residence of Nancy Guthrie, the 84-year-old mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie, days after she was reported missing. At the same location, another detail stood out. A home security camera near the front door appeared to have been removed. Authorities have not confirmed whose biological material was found, how it got there, or when it appeared. But they did confirm this was serious enough to classify the home as a crime scene. And from that moment on, this case stopped being just a missing person report. What makes this situation especially unsettling isn't speculation. It's what officials won't yet say and what the timeline quietly reveals. Nancy Guthrie was last seen late Saturday night around 9:30 p.m. at her home in the Catalina foothills area north of Tucson, Arizona. By all public accounts, nothing unusual was immediately reported that night. The following day, around noon, her family contacted authorities to report her missing. That delay is important because investigators later stated they do not believe she simply left on her own. According to Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos, authorities believe Nancy was taken against her will. However, no suspects have been publicly identified, and officials have not confirmed whether one or multiple individuals may be involved. What they did say was carefully worded and telling. They described conditions inside the home as very concerning, not alarming, not suspicious, very concerning, and that distinction matters. So what exactly crossed the line from a welfare check to a full crime scene investigation? During a press conference, law enforcement confirmed the presence of what they described only as biological DNA evidence at the home. They did not specify what type. They did not confirm whether it belonged to Nancy. They did not explain how it was discovered. Later, a source familiar with the investigation told People that a trail of what appeared to be droplets was visible near the front steps of the home. Importantly, officials have not publicly confirmed this description themselves, and that silence is deliberate. In active investigations, authorities often withhold details not to create drama, but to protect the integrity of the case. And that suggests something else may already be known behind the scenes. But there's another element here that raises even more questions. And it has nothing to do with physical evidence. It has to do with time. Sheriff Nanos publicly confirmed that Nancy Guthrie requires daily medication. According to authorities, going without it for more than 24 hours could become life-threatening. That statement reframes the entire search. This is no longer just about locating a missing person. It becomes a race against time. Officials also emphasized that Nancy has no cognitive impairment. She was described as mentally sharp, alert, and fully aware. However, she was not in good physical health. That combination, mental clarity paired with physical vulnerability, is crucial. It directly challenges any assumption that she wandered off or became disoriented, and investigators made that point clear. As the sheriff stated plainly, we know she didn't just walk out of there. So if she didn't leave on her own, and no suspects have been named, what direction is this investigation actually heading? One of the quieter but most discussed details involves the home's security setup. Sources indicate that remnants of what appeared to be a ring camera were found near the front door area, suggesting it may have been removed. Authorities have not confirmed who removed it when it was removed or whether any footage was recovered. But investigators have acknowledged that they are reviewing surveillance footage and license plate reader data from the surrounding area. That tells us two things. First, they believe movement, not an accident, played a role. Second, they believe there may be a traceable path away from the home. And that brings the investigation beyond the house itself. As the search intensified, Savannah Guthrie did not appear on Today for multiple consecutive days. NBC confirmed she was with her family in Arizona. Later, Savannah posted a brief message on Instagram asking followers to please pray. No statements, no speculation, no public theories. Just silence and a request for support. And in cases like this, that restraint often speaks louder than words. At this point, investigators are balancing three realities: a confirmed disappearance, evidence serious enough to secure a crime scene, and a narrowing medical spotty window. But the most important question still remains unanswered. Not what was found, but when everything actually began. Because the timeline may hold the key to understanding what happened next. When investigators say they are confident Nancy Guthrie didn't simply leave her home, that conclusion isn't based on instinct. It's based on timing. Nancy was last seen at approximately 9:30 p.m. on Saturday night. Her family reported her missing around noon the following day. That creates a window of roughly 14 hours, a critical gap investigators are now dissecting, minute by minute. According to law enforcement, there is no indication she made plans to go anywhere, no known appointments, and no public information suggesting she intended to leave overnight. For an 84-year-old woman who requires daily medication, that matters. It suggests any departure from the home during that time was either unexpected or not voluntary. And this is where the case quietly shifts. From searching for a person to reconstructing a moment. Authorities don't classify a home as a crime scene lightly. Doing so restricts access, triggers specialized forensic processing, and signals that investigators believe evidence inside the location could explain how, not just where, someone disappeared. Sheriff Nanos described what was found as very concerning, without elaboration. That choice of words is intentional. In law enforcement communication, phrases like that are often used when details are still being verified, potentially sensitive to the investigation, or known, but strategically withheld. It's also notable that officials confirmed the presence of biological DNA evidence, but did not specify whether it belonged to Nancy or someone else. That omission leaves multiple possibilities open and keeps the investigation flexible. But if the home itself holds answers, why are investigators also looking far beyond it? Authorities have confirmed they are reviewing surveillance footage and license plate reader data. This is a critical clue about investigative direction. License plate readers are not used unless investigators believe a vehicle may be involved, either leaving the area or passing through at a relevant time. Combined with the removed camera near the front door, this suggests a focus on movement rather than an internal medical emergency or accidental event. In other words, investigators appear to be asking who came near the home and who left. And more importantly, did anyone leave with Nancy? Yet despite all of this activity, one thing remains strikingly absent. There is no public suspect description. As of now, authorities have not identified any suspects. They have not named a person of interest. They have not released composite sketches. They have not issued vehicle descriptions. That silence can mean several things, none of which point to inaction. In early stages of complex investigations, withholding suspect information can indicate evidence is still being corroborated, leads are being quietly tracked, or investigators are avoiding alerting someone prematurely. Sheriff Nanos himself stated that he does not know whether one or more individuals were involved. That level of uncertainty, expressed publicly, suggests investigators are still assembling the foundation of the case, not reacting impulsively. But there's another layer to this story that often goes unnoticed, and it has nothing to do with evidence, and everything to do with exposure. Because Nancy Guthrie is the mother of a nationally known television journalist, the case carries unavoidable public visibility. Law enforcement is aware that every statement will be scrutinized, not just by the public, but by media professionals who understand how investigations unfold. This can lead to more cautious communication, not less. Every confirmed detail must be accurate. Every phrase must be defensible. Every omission must be intentional. In that context, the lack of speculation from authorities isn't a void, it's a boundary. And while officials remain careful, the medical timeline continues to press forward. Which brings us to the most urgent and unresolved part of this case. Nancy Guthrie's need for daily medication isn't a background detail. It's a ticking clock. Investigators have publicly acknowledged that extended absence from her medication could become life-threatening. That raises a difficult question authorities haven't yet answered publicly. Are they searching for someone in danger, or racing to prevent the worst outcome? The answer to that may shape every decision being made behind the scenes right now. At this stage, investigators are working with a narrow time window, evidence serious enough to secure a home, and a vulnerability that limits how long uncertainty can last. But there is still one critical unknown that could change everything. Not who was involved, not how it happened, but why this home on this night. And that question leads directly into the next phase of the investigation. In many high-profile missing person cases, the public naturally focuses on what happened. Investigators, however, prioritize a different question first. Why this person, in this place, at this time? Understanding motive doesn't mean assigning blame. It means narrowing possibilities. And in Nancy Guthrie's case, publicly available information presents a very specific profile. She was elderly, mentally alert, physically vulnerable, living in a quiet residential area. There is no public indication of random travel, confusion, or personal instability. That narrows the investigative field considerably, because when a disappearance doesn't fit the pattern of accident or confusion, investigators begin ruling things out. Fast, Sheriff Nanos's statement that authorities believe Nancy was taken against her will is one of the strongest conclusions made so far. That phrasing is not casual. It implies investigators believe there was external involvement. The departure was not consensual, and the situation escalated beyond a simple misunderstanding. Importantly, this does not automatically imply a specific crime has been charged or confirmed. It means investigators believe evidence points toward coercion, whether physical, situational, or circumstantial. And that belief dramatically changes investigative priorities. But if coercion is suspected, why hasn't law enforcement described how they reach that conclusion? In active investigations, withholding details often serves a purpose. Releasing too much information can compromise witness testimony, alert individuals investigators may be monitoring, or create public narratives that interfere with facts. By confirming only that biological DNA evidence exists, without specifying its nature, authorities maintain flexibility. They preserve the ability to compare future findings, validate or disprove emerging leads, and control the investigative timeline. This isn't secrecy for drama's sake. It's structure, and that structure becomes even more important when pressure builds, both publicly and privately. As days pass, the nature of a search evolves. Early stages focus on immediate recovery and location. Later stages shift toward reconstruction and accountability. In Nancy Guthrie's case, the added factor of required medication compresses that timeline. Authorities are balancing urgency with accuracy. Move too fast, and mistakes happen. Move too slow, and consequences escalate. This is why investigators often rely heavily on digital and environmental data early on. Surveillance footage, license plate readers, and neighborhood canvassing. These sources don't speculate, they record, which raises another question quietly forming beneath the surface. What if the most important answers don't come from witnesses, but from patterns? Law enforcement investigations rarely hinge on a single dramatic clue. They rely on patterns. Movement patterns, timing patterns, behavioral consistency. If Nancy did not leave on her own, investigators will be looking for unusual vehicle activity, disruptions in routine, technology gaps such as missing camera footage. The removed or damaged security camera near the front door becomes significant not as a symbol, but as a disruption. Something that should have been there wasn't, and disruptions tend to point somewhere. Still, there's a reason officials continue to emphasize restraint in their language, because this case isn't just about solving a puzzle, it's about responsibility. You may notice that authorities consistently use phrases like believed to be, according to available information. At this time, this isn't uncertainty, it's accountability. Every public statement becomes part of the record. If circumstances change, investigators need room to adjust without contradicting themselves or misleading the public. In cases with national attention, that margin matters even more, and that national attention leads to another factor most people overlook. Savannah Guthrie's public silence, aside from a brief request for prayers, reflects a choice many families make in these situations. Let investigators work, avoid speculation, preserve privacy where possible. Behind the scenes, families are often providing critical background information, answering difficult questions, and reliving timelines repeatedly. That emotional weight rarely appears in official updates, but it shapes them. At this stage, the investigation sits at a crossroads. Evidence exists, but isn't fully explained. Time is critical, but patience is necessary. Public attention is high, but information remains limited. And as history shows, cases like this often pivot on one development. Not always dramatic, not always public, but decisive. When law enforcement reaches this stage of a missing person investigation, the work often becomes less visible, but more precise. Public updates may slow down, not because progress has stopped, but because the focus shifts inward. This phase typically involves deep review of digital timelines, repeated analysis of surveillance footage, cross-checking vehicle movement data, quiet follow-ups on early leads. From the outside, it can feel like nothing is happening. From the inside, this is often where cases either clarify or narrow dramatically. And that narrowing process depends on one critical factor most people underestimate: consistency. Early in an investigation, large facts dominate attention. Later, it's the small inconsistencies that matter most. A car that passes twice when it shouldn't, a device that stops transmitting earlier than expected, a routine that breaks without explanation. Investigators compare what should have happened based on Nancy Guthrie's habits and health needs with what actually happened. Any gap between those two becomes a potential lead, and gaps don't stay invisible forever. But here's the part the public rarely hears. Progress doesn't always come from new information. Sometimes it comes from rereading the old information differently. In complex cases, investigators often return to the same people, locations, and data multiple times. This isn't redundancy, it's refinement. As new context emerges, earlier details can take on new meaning. Something dismissed as routine at first may later stand out as unusual. This is especially true when investigators believe a situation involved planning rather than chance, and that belief appears to be guiding this case. Which brings us to a question many people are asking, quietly. Why hasn't there been a major public update yet? Law enforcement agencies balance two responsibilities: keeping the public informed, protecting the investigation. When information is incomplete, releasing it too early can do more harm than good. In high-visibility cases, premature details can spread faster than corrections. That's why officials often wait until evidence is corroborated, timelines align, and statements can be made with confidence. Until then, silence is often the safest option. Still, there's one more element shaping how this case unfolds: public expectation. Because of Savannah Guthrie's public role, this case exists in two spaces at once: a private family crisis and a nationally observed investigation. Law enforcement must navigate both carefully. Too much information invites speculation. Too little invites frustration. The goal isn't to satisfy curiosity, it's to resolve the case responsibly. And that responsibility extends beyond resolution itself. It includes how the outcome is understood. Not every case reaches a clear public conclusion quickly. Sometimes resolution comes quietly. Sometimes through legal processes that take time. Sometimes through information that isn't immediately shareable. What matters most, from an investigative standpoint, is accuracy, not speed. And accuracy requires patience. Right now, this case remains defined by three realities: a confirmed disappearance, evidence serious enough to demand caution, and unanswered questions that require precision, not pressure. But there is one final layer that connects all of this: not evidence, not timelines, but meaning. What this case represents beyond headlines. Beyond the headlines and limited confirmed details, this case highlights something broader. It shows how quickly certainty can disappear, even in familiar, quiet places. It shows how investigations are built not on speculation, but on restraint, verification, and time. And it shows why officials choose their words carefully, especially when the situation involves vulnerability, urgency, and unanswered questions. Nancy Guthrie's disappearance is still being actively investigated. What is known has been shared deliberately. What remains unknown is being examined methodically. That balance isn't accidental. It's the process working as intended. Cases like this remind us that not every answer arrives all at once. Some clarity comes from timelines, some from patterns, some from information that only becomes meaningful later. Right now, investigators are focused on understanding movement, opportunity, and sequence, not on feeding public narratives. And while that can feel unsettling, it's often how lasting answers are found. In situations involving missing individuals, especially those with medical needs, every development carries weight. But pressure doesn't replace precision. Law enforcement has emphasized care, accuracy, and responsibility, signaling that conclusions will be drawn only when evidence supports them. That approach protects not only the investigation, but the people connected to it. As this case continues, meaningful updates are most likely to come in specific forms. Confirmation of timeline clarity, information about verified movement, or official statements that close existing gaps. Until then, silence doesn't mean absence of effort. It means work is ongoing. This story isn't just about what happened. It's about how understanding develops. The next phase of coverage will focus on how investigations transition from uncertainty to clarity and what typically triggers that shift. Not speculation, not rumor, but confirmed developments and procedural milestones. Because understanding the process helps separate fact from assumption and patience from panic.